God's story, your life. Unfolding short stories.
I was a makeup artist and I was looking for a makeup studio. The journey to doing that was really long. I was either finding spaces that were in my budget but didn't work, or spaces that were way over my budget. And it was my first time looking for a retail space. I was also about 7 months pregnant at the time with my second child. So my husband called me one day and he said, "Do you want to take a look at my friend's studio? I've been sharing it with him. I told you about it and, come and take a look at it." So I go with him to this studio and it's in an area that I've been looking at, and there's just nothing available in this area. And so my husband has keys and he's meeting his own clients in his friend's photo studio. He turned on all the lights. I kind of stepped forward and turned around and looked at my husband and said, "You need to tell your friend that he's got to leave my studio." And of course, my husband looks at me like I'm crazy. And I said, "You have to tell your friend he's got to get out of my studio. This place is absolutely perfect. It's exactly what I've been looking for." He says, "Woman, we got to go. You're just being so silly. Let's just, let's get out of here." So we leave. And about 2 weeks later, my husband calls me from work and he says, "You're never going to believe this, but my friend said that he's going to move out of his studio and he wants to know if you want it." And of course, I was like, "Absolutely." It was just this thing that fell out of the sky. So I said, "Okay, God, here we go. I'm going to jump in." And so at 8 months pregnant with a 3-year-old child at home, I took the keys to a little studio and I turned it into the cutest little makeup studio that downtown Whitby, Ontario had ever seen. Over the years, God blessed my studio. He blessed my business. I ended up with a team of 15 hair and makeup artists that would go out on my behalf and provide hair and makeup services under my company name. And interesting things started to happen. Whenever you have a store downtown, you're also going to bring in very interesting characters. My studio was almost a best kept secret because I didn't advertise to have people to come into the studio. It was more so I was providing hair and makeup services for weddings. And so someone had to contact me for a wedding in order to know that my studio was there. So I was often in the studio alone during the week, and then I had my artists come in on the weekends. And one day when I was by myself, just sitting at my computer answering email, my door creaked open and I kind of jumped. I didn't have any appointments booked. Sometimes my landlord would come by, but he had already come by for the day. When I looked up, there was a woman that I didn't know, and I didn't understand what she was doing there, actually. I've never been a person who drank, and I didn't really, in high school, hang out with people who drank or took substances, mostly because I thought I might die if I tried any of those things. So I had this woman at my door, and I wasn't sure if she was drunk or if she was high. I was in my 30s and a bit naive. And I asked her what she needed. And she just kind of, I guess you could say, emotionally threw up on me. She wanted to know if she could use my bathroom. And I said, "No, I don't think that's a good idea." She said, I promise, I just have to use the bathroom." And I reluctantly allowed her to do that. And when she came out, she told me the strangest story about her kids and her life and what was happening to her. And it was one of those stories that you think, well, surely that's all this person has been through. But then there was just more and more and more. And I thought to myself, this woman needs Jesus. But I didn't really know how to bring that conversation up to this complete stranger that was in my store. And in that moment of her telling me her story, I thought to myself, this woman is in the store on this particular street that has the most stairs. She's drunk. She's probably in the only store that has a box of Bibles in the back. So I knew that God had sent this person into my particular store. I was most likely the only believer on the street. I knew all my neighbors, and God literally sent her into my store. So I was kind of new at this idea of sharing the gospel in this particular way. I was just really thrown off guard. If we were in a church or at a church event, I think I would have known exactly what to do, but I was just completely thrown off guard by this interaction. So I went to the back of my closet. I pulled out a Bible and I gave it to her. And I said to her, I think you need this. And she started to cry. And she said, there's no way that God could forgive me for the things that I have done. And I said, if my daughter says to me that she's hungry, but she's done something naughty just before then, there's no way that I'm going to not give her what she needs. And in the same way, our Father in heaven, he does the same things for us. And so even though you've done some things you shouldn't have done, if you ask for forgiveness, he'll forgive you. And so I gave her the Bible and I wanted to follow up with her. So I asked her for her phone number, but unfortunately, because she was so drunk, she didn't remember her phone number. I said, okay, well, what's your address? And she started writing and she couldn't remember. And so she wrote something down. It's almost like the Holy Spirit had lifted, I guess you could say. She was totally listening to me and she was in a moment with me, but all of a sudden, whatever had her listening had lifted. And she hastily left my studio with the Bible in her hand. And once she left, I thought to myself, I really wish I had prayed with her. Why didn't I pray with her? So I kind of started to kick myself for that. But that was just one interaction of many interactions that happened in my studio. And I still think about her. It's been probably 6 years, and I still wonder what happened to that lady that stumbled into my makeup studio, drunk and needing to have a spiritual hug from God. The thing that I learned from that interaction is that as a Christian business person, it's really important that we don't insulate ourselves within our own community, because there's people out there that don't know the Lord that really need us to bring light to them. And God didn't bring me very many believers at all in my 22 plus years of being a makeup artist. I could probably count them on both hands. There's times where he's brought me to be a light to people, and I was really either in my head thinking I'm too busy for this, or too tired for this, or fill in the blank. But it's not lost on me that that woman stumbled drunk into the only store on that street that literally had a box of Bibles in the back. And it was just the beginning of many other interactions with people where I was literally the only believer in a room full of brokenness. So I have my makeup studio and I have my team of artists, and we're out in the world and we're providing services. I'm getting published in magazines. My star is rising, I guess you could say, in my career. I'm at the Michael Jordan pinnacle of my career. It's going fantastic. My business has hit 6 figures. I had a business coach, 2 small kids under the age of 7, and it's going really well. I have people literally telling me that they admire my career. They admire what I've done. I am one of the very, very, very few Black service providers in a very non-Black side of the wedding industry in my area. I'm on TV and all these great things are happening. And one day I go and do a wedding and I get paid very, very handsomely to provide this service. It's like the most perfect client that you could ever have. And I get into my car and I slump in my seat and I'm holding a $200 tip. They tell me how great everything was and I should just be really happy. And I'm not. I start to question myself because I can feel it. Like, I'm not happy right now. Lord, what just happened? And so over a couple of months, I start to kind of feel the same way. Like, I'm not excited about what I'm doing anymore. And then all of a sudden, everything starts to get really, really hard. I call my business coach and I say to her, I'm breaking up with you. And she's not a believer, so she doesn't understand. She sees everything that I'm doing and she's like, what do you mean you're breaking up with me? And I said, I don't know if God wants me to be a makeup artist anymore. And I'm not quite sure what to do about that. So I have to go figure that out. And again, because she's not a believer, she's like, okay, I don't know what that means, but okay, let me know how you're doing. And I'm like, okay, thank you for everything. And off I go to try to figure out, what is this feeling that I'm having about closing my makeup studio? It's just a pressure. That's the only way that I can describe it. It's just a lot of pressure, a little bit of confusion, but also a lot of challenge. And one thing I said to my business coach was, business is hard, but this is excruciating. Things just weren't going well. They weren't falling into place the way that they had been before. My clients were seeming to be more difficult. The artists that I was working with were becoming more difficult. And I was getting really, really tired, and my kids were small. I was sleep deprived. And so I started asking God questions like, why do I feel like you want me to close my studio? And after a couple months, little did I know that it wasn't just that I felt like God was asking me to close my studio. I felt like God was asking me to stop doing makeup. I'm like, okay, all right, Lord, I'm having all these conversations with God. And I said, I will do whatever you want me to do, but you have to tell me what to do next. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next if I'm not supposed to do this. And of course, there's absolutely no answer when we demand things from the Lord. And one day, just in a fit of frustration, I remember standing in my cute little makeup studio and I screamed out, fine, if you want me to close it, I'll close it. And so I started to, in 2018, wind down the thing that I adored and loved dearly. And I stopped taking bookings and I started referring the people that I was working to for those bookings. And I started to close my makeup studio and wind down my actual career. I closed my studio and I thought, well, maybe I can just book a couple weddings here and there. New Year's Eve, 2019, I did my last wedding and I parked my car out front of my client's house. And again, fantastic day. I even shared the gospel with somebody, had the most amazing morning. And when I went out to my car, I opened the door and the door swung in a way where it almost hit me in the face, which is like almost kind of impossible with a car door because it was such force. It almost hit me in the face. I take a step back. I realize someone has hit my car wheel well. And because of that dent, I couldn't fully open the door. That's why it snapped back so abruptly. Wow, God. Okay, I heard you now. I will stop trying to be a makeup artist. And in the long run, my $600 gig that I just tried to sneak in at the end of the year turned into a $1,000 fix. So I didn't come out ahead in that wedding. So that was the end of 2019. And I think everyone knows what happened next. 3 months later, in March in 2020, the entire world shut down. And I'm Canadian, so we had some very strict lockdowns. And for us, the entire wedding industry was decimated. Just boom, imploded. And I remember that March as I was reading newspaper article after newspaper article about people having to close their businesses down, wedding providers, people just literally losing everything. I remember just kind of crawling back into bed one day, curling up in a little ball and crying because way back in 2018, when God was prompting me to close my business, He was setting a runway for me so I could start something new before COVID came, or at least that's how I see it.
The Unfolding is a Wow God production, a ministry of the University of Northwestern St. Paul. Discover more at wowgod.com.